Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. There are renewed calls this afternoon for more to be done to protect the homeless against acts of violence in Jamaica. This follows the deadly attack on 6 homeless men in the corporate area recently. Details in this report. The attack on members of the homeless community sent shockwaves across the island. 6 homeless men were viciously attacked in the capital between Sunday night and Monday morning. 4 died and 2 remain in hospital battling for life. Nurse Administrator at the Community for Upliftment of the Mentally Ill in St. James, Joy Crooks, says homeless persons are living under threat. Ms. Crooks wants more to be done to address the issue.
The homeless are always in a threat, living in an environment where they're exposed to danger, exposed to the element, and there are individuals, I've had experience dealing with individuals who were just attacked for no reason at all, just for being maybe unsightly to somebody.
Nurse Crooks says not all persons living on the street have a mental challenge and urged persons to stop abusing them.
People who are homeless for all different reasons. Not everyone's mentally ill, which is the way people think here, that everybody on the street must be someone with mental health issues. People are homeless for all different reasons. And being in the open, even amongst themselves, they feel as though there is a constant threat.
There are approximately 2,000 homeless people living across Jamaica, with some 700 residing in Kingston alone. It's the reason human rights advocate Susan Goff wants a permanent fix for the problem.
There is a need not only for the temporary housing that a night shelter provides, but there is a need for focus on permanent housing. And as she said, where you have persons using the night shelter as permanent housing.
The government has extended COVID measures under the Disaster Risk Management Act to March 1. But speaking in Parliament Tuesday, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says his administration is considering a number of proposals to take effect February 1, among them allowing churches to host funerals.
What we are proposing is that the family of no more than 10 and the clergy or officiating ministers of no more than 5 can be in the church with the casket holding the religious rites of a funeral. So, Madam Speaker, we are not allowing mass open-ended funerals, regardless of how large the church is. It is the same rule that is applied at the graveside would be the same rule that is applied in the church.
Meanwhile, changes will also be made to the public transportation sector.
We're approving 1 passenger standing for every 5 seats in the bus. So if you have the common 30-seater, then you could have 6 persons standing in the bus, and we estimate that that would be, good enough in terms of social distancing.
The latest COVID-19 data from the Ministry of Health shows that another 88 new confirmed cases were confirmed on Tuesday. Now, this has pushed the total number of cases to 15,241. Kingston and St. Andrew again recorded most of the new cases, followed by Manchester, Clarendon and St. James. Meanwhile, there are 3 more persons have died from the illness. The country's COVID-19 death toll is now 342. And we now go to a break right here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. A call this afternoon for residents to report cases where children have not been attending classes. The call comes from Chief Guidance Counselor for Region 2 at a ceremony in Lyson St. Thomas. Details in this report.
Many students are forced to use online and televised platforms to continue their education as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier this month, at least 216 schools across the island resumed face-to-face classes. However, it has been observed that some students might not have been attending classes virtually or physically. Speaking recently in Lyson St. Thomas, Guidance Counselor Patricia Salmon raised the concern that some students might be excluded from the education system. Ms. Salmon is urging residents who may know of any children that have not been attending classes, whether virtually or physically, to report the matter to the Child Protection and Family Services Agency.
If you know of a child or children who are not of any of those four modalities, then you need to report it. The Child Care and Protection Act will label that as the child doing something that is in the best interest of the child, and the Child Care and Protection Act says if you suspect, not if you know, if you suspect you see them riding bicycle up and down from morning till night, and you don't see them off the street or with a book, then you need to report that.
More than 30 students in the community received tablets. The devices were donated by the Church of God in Christ, a licensed charity organization, in collaboration with the National Education Trust. Since the onset of COVID-19 in March, remote learning has increased the demand for tablets. This to enable children to continue their education at home without taking risks associated with large gatherings. Ms. Salmon also made an appeal to students.
Don't go on any illegal sites. Don't do that. Use it for the purpose that it is given for schoolwork. And I said earlier, share it with others. And finally, make the best use of every opportunity that you are given. And always remember this: you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. And always pray and trust in God. He will lead you and He will guide you.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
Churches are expressing concerns about the spate of killings over the last few days. Bishop of the Holiness Christian Churches, Dr. Alvin Bailey, is calling on the government to get churches more involved in addressing the crime situation in the country before it gets worse. Shamila Pullen reports.
Over the last few days, more than 80 people have been killed, almost all by the gun. This is a concern for church groups like the Holiness Christian Churches. Bishop of the Holiness Christian Churches, Dr. Alvin Bailey, says he thinks the COVID-19 pandemic is pushing people to violence to deal with their frustrations.
Children are going to school, and it added demand on parents to provide amenities that their children would need and instruments in order to afford quality education. And just the inability and constraints, I believe, has put additional pressure on the average person, certainly on fathers. And the man who was unemployable and unemployed, he also has a pent-up kind of frustration that would lead him to being angry and discontented and lead to kind of deviance.
Bishop Dr. Bailey says the government needs to get the churches more involved in tackling this problem. He said the government is having a difficulty putting a handle on the situation.
I don't know what else they need to do. I'm still believing that there can be committees and commissions that are set up to look more deeply in the kind of violence we're having and criminal activities, because I think there's a change in trend, certainly increase in number. So I don't think they're doing enough at all, and something needs to be done. Well, we heard the Prime Minister recently decrying the situation, calling for hardware. So maybe there's also the need for a kind of intervention that involves the church.
Bishop Dr. Bailey said the churches, more than any organization, has been in touch with communities. Meanwhile, he said the churches continue to do their part in reaching out to the various communities.
The church has intensified its praying. We are visiting our communities. We are visiting the people who are affected, because there's also a significant part of the crime that has to do with things like reprisal. And the church is pretty trained and are aware of that. The church provides a kind of motivation, comfort, peace, and just the value system that persons would naturally, avert to when these things happen. The church provides a sense of buffer between the action and the anger.
Shamela Pullen, TVJ News.
A man was shot and killed in Hatfield district in Manchester Tuesday morning. He's been identified as 54-year-old Everton Rangoon, also known as Ginger. Reports say about 8 o'clock, a man approached Mr. Rangoon and fired shots at him. The killer escaped in a waiting motorcar. Now it resulted in a pileup of traffic along the Greenvale to Spurtree roadway. A member of Nicholas Graham's legal team says that the businessman is expected to be charged or released after he is questioned by narcotics investigators this afternoon. Now it's the latest development in the saga involving the Clarendon-based businessman. On Tuesday afternoon, placard-bearing residents gathered on the coastal community of Rocky Point to demand Mr. Graham's release from police custody. The protesters hurled verbal insults at the police as they watched while Mr. Graham's house and business place were searched by detectives. Residents argue that the businessman was being unfairly targeted by police, insisting he is no wrongdoer.
You know a pretty fan, my 14-year-old. Fan my little boy roll up and down and buy Lobster Beach. And there's some things there. And something. Pity I trying youth. And something. Pity could have been my son.
I give me work for usually clean.
All the while, so man. All the while, so. Oh, God, man. Oh, God, man. All the while, so man. They just give him a fight, so man.
Now, the large deployment of police and soldiers in Rocky Point were untroubled for the most part as the protesters remained peaceful. To other news now, vendors in St. Mary are set to benefit from a new facility come next week. Mayor of Port Maria, Richard Creary, made the announcement on Tuesday. More in this report.
The market in Port Maria St. Mary will be the new home for some 50 vendors. This comes as renovation work on the market is now finished. Mayor Richard Creary said over the years persons have complained about the market being crowded and not wanting to use the facility. It's the reason he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to persons making any addition to stalls, which he says will reduce the space created for persons to walk in the market.
There will be clear walkways. One of the things in the past, when the previous market was here, sometimes you come, the goods there all about, you can't find place to walk. And then we wonder why people don't want to come in the market. You're going to utilize what we have provided. It's not your stall, it's our own. We rent you it for the days that you're going to use the market. So you're not allowed to tamper with it, cut off piece, add on piece.
According to Mayor Creary, cart operators have long been a problem in the St. Mary capital. This, he said, has negatively impacted free flow of traffic. To remedy the situation, the mayor says they won't be allowed.
The cart vendors that have taken over the streets of Port Maria. And as of this weekend, that will stop. Let me repeat. As of this weekend, that will stop.
One vendor who's been selling in the area for more than 5 years said she's grateful for the upgrade. She's encouraging other vendors to utilize the facility.
I feel very wonderful. I feel very happy. For plenty time I out the road son about me, I don't tell no lie. I have to run for rain. So when me I can sit down comfortable and sell.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we'll look at mindfulness techniques to deal with the mental effects of COVID-19.
Just being at home, getting up, having a shower, and some persons are there working from home. So all of this creates stress on the body. This results in a lot of mental health issues arising. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has reached out to professional bodies like ours, encouraging us to engage the population to help combat this stress and mental health crisis that is arising because of the pandemic.
That's the Health Report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. Meditate. Do one task at a time. Engage in physical activities you are passionate about. And spend time outside.
News in sports now. Minister of Sports Olivia Grange is refuting claims of a bias against sports in the government's response to the resumption of activities following restrictions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. But in part one of this story, President of the Sports Medicine Association, Dr. Gwyn Jones, says the government's response has been biased, even if not deliberate. Jermaine Brown reports.
Last week, coach of the Excelsior High Track and Field team and president of the Jamaica Track and Field Coaches Association, David Riley, criticized the response to the return of sports on the island. He said a national prejudice towards sports and people who participate in sports was behind the restrictions on non-contact sports. Riley's comments came after all the scheduled local January track and field meets had to be postponed after failing to get clearance from the government. When TVJ Sports caught up with Sports Minister Olivia Grange to get a response to Coach Riley's comments, she had this to say.
There's no prejudice against sports, the sports sector, and there's no prejudice against the entertainment sector. There is genuine concern. Remember, we're into community spread. And so we have to be careful. In the interest of those persons who are in the sector, it's in their own interest, right? And so there's no prejudice. We just want to be cautious.
But President of the Jamaica Sports Medicine Association, Dr. Kevin Gwyn Jones, in noting that they had recommended protocol lists for both contact and non-contact sports from September last year, did not mince words.
Apart from horse racing, where I figure there are probably some more financial gains to the government through taxes for that, there really hasn't been a conscious effort to get sports back in action locally, so the response now in January is a bit late because we've had examples of people returning to sports all over the world.
He pointed out that most non-contact sports could have already resumed with the necessary protocols in place.
Such as track and field, cycling, motorsports, etc., horse racing. It's a lot easier for you to return to those sports by just practicing basically all the recommendations put forward by all the major health organizations in the world and the Ministry of Health, that such as mask wearing, social distancing, and regular and frequent hand sanitization, and the protocols put together actually makes it more safe to return to some of these sports than it is for people to go to their workplace or go to a supermarket or hardware store.
Most sporting disciplines have been sidelined since March last year due to restrictions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. In part 2, we explore the impact of the current limitation on sports in schools. Jermaine Brown reporting for TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, the sports, and the production teams, have a good afternoon.